Hey guys, it's Elon from Inside Fighting. I got a special collab today. Stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. We're going to be talking a lot about Bullshido and some other crazy stuff. So let's jump right in.
Pow, pow. Inside fighting. Yeah. Dangerous martial arts. Pow, pow. Ooh, ah.
All right, guys. So my special guest today is someone who you may know who's awesome. Rob from McDojo Life. I've been a fan of your stuff for a very long time, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like your stuff has been very cool. I like the fact that you go out, you pressure test stuff on your own, you're looking into things firsthand experience. I think that's great. I think it's very healthy for the community too.
Thank you, man. So I mean, we were talking a little bit before this. If you want to give a little bit of a background about your martial arts history and kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been training since I was 12 years old. I've been in the industry for 27 years. Third degree black belt in American freestyle karate. It's basically like kickboxing. I'm a third degree black belt in something called Judo, which is a weapon system no one's ever heard of. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 6-0 amateur boxer, 4-2 amateur kickboxer. I was on an international kickboxing team for 2 years called Team Full Circle, and then ran a school for about 4 years. And now for like the last 12 years or so, I've been doing McDojo Life full-time, as well as martial arts business consulting for school owners. And then as of this last year, I am now the vice president of a company called Academy Safe. And our ultimate goal is to make sure that martial arts school owners are doing their due diligence around the people who are working with them, like CPR, first aid, local federal background checks, cameras in the dojo, stuff like that.
It's so important. You opened my eyes like we were talking about previously. By the way, guys, all the socials for McDojo Life are going to be in the description below. If you don't follow McDojo Life, go follow it. You're going to crack up. I mean, I spend a lot of time just scrolling and cracking up on some of these videos. But also the other important thing that you did outside of the funny videos is you opened my eyes to the amount of predators there are in this world of martial arts. Shocking, but you kind of broke it down in a way that made sense to me.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that there are so many people in positions of power, which is a term that you used earlier, which is a perfect term for it. But there are so many people in the martial arts industry in positions of power over people who need a good mentor, and they take advantage of that, whether it be female, whether it be financial, whether it be physical, whether it be children. There's so many things that they could take advantage of in this industry, all because we as a society have deemed these people to have virtues that they might not have. Honor, integrity, respect, discipline, all because you're wearing a black belt. That's a piece of cloth, and martial arts is a service. That's it. Like, I would never get mad at or I'd never have my barber get mad at me if I went to another barber. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, who cut your hair this time? Like, they wouldn't care. They'd just be happy you came back. And that would be the same for any service ever. But somehow in martial arts, these instructors sometimes will take ownership of you, like you're a piece of property to them, or that you owe them something other than a monthly fee. Mm-hmm. You owe them nothing. You owe them respect when respect is due. You owe them money if you paid for the contract and you paid for the business agreement. Past that, everything else is earned. And I think that as a society, maybe we should just stop giving away this respect that hasn't been earned, because all we're doing is feeding the ego of the instructor. If they earn it, I'm going to give it to them because they're a good person, not because they're wearing a black belt.
Yeah, we talked about that. Like some of the experiences I've had where someone who is, higher ranking in a certain system than you, all of a sudden they believe they're experts in every other area of your life. And I was like, this makes no sense. Like, you're not an accountant. You know what I mean? You're not a relationship expert. You're a black belt in a style of martial arts. I hate when my students start expecting me to know more about other areas of their life. And I'm just here to teach you self-defense. I'm here to teach you how to cover up your head. I'm here to make you feel comfortable under pressure and stress. I hope that translates to other areas of your life, but I'm not your relationship coach. You know what I mean? People give way too much respect to their martial arts teachers because of this kind of like fantasy of the black belt is like this insane thing. So yeah, I very much agree with you on those things.
Yeah. What's even stranger is even people who have been in the industry for a long period of time. Like I was telling you, I do business consulting for martial arts studios. And the only reason I even started doing that, one, because I've been doing this forever. It's all I've ever really known as a job. But when I started McDojo Life, people started asking, how come this guy who's a complete fraud has so many students and I can't get any of mine to show up? And it's the fantasy that just because they've done martial arts for so long means that they know the business side of this, when they truly don't. And that's a shame, because what that means is that the fraud has at least taken the time to understand the business side of things. And they clearly don't know what they're doing, but they are packing their classes with students, while the guy who has dedicated his or her life to training martial arts to become an instructor and is good at it never took the time to be humble enough to remember what it was like to start martial arts. You know, when you start martial arts, you go, I don't know how to fight, or I don't know this art. So what do? You find someone who does, and you trust that they will help you learn that art. And usually you know pretty quickly whether or not they can. Like, oh, well, they just tied me up into a pretzel. There was nothing I could do about it. I'm still. But whenever they start their own business and they take that transition to go from, okay, I'm a black belt, I've trained, I know the curriculum, I can teach, and they've done all of that, which takes a long time. Then when they start the business, they don't have that white belt mentality anymore. They don't go, well, you know what? I'm not a business owner. I don't know what it's like to run one. Maybe I should find someone who does know how to do this. That ego kicks in, and now they think they're just a black belt in all aspects of their life. You're not. Like, you can kick and punch people well. Go to any prison ever, and you'll find plenty of people who can beat people up efficiently. Does that mean that they're trustworthy? Does that mean they can run a business? Does that mean they're good people? Absolutely not. So it's like such a low on the totem pole skill. But for some reason in martial arts, we boost our own egos by putting it up on such a high platform. It really doesn't deserve to be there. Like, it's a thing you do that you'll probably, hopefully, only have to do once or twice in your real life, unless you're getting paid for it. And if you're getting paid for it, then yes, you should be studying and training. But it's just a skill that you're rarely going to use outside of the gym or in competition.
Yeah, the best schools I've seen in terms of success are the ones who take the time, like you said, to have the business side of things just as established as a skill side. Arguably, the skill side is less important than the business side, because the average person doesn't know what they don't know. They'll go into a school, they'll think it's good, and it's terrible, like you had spoken about. And as long as they were pitched properly, so when you see a collaboration between really high skill with someone who's a businessman, you start seeing a really, really good outcome. Unfortunately, I just don't see that often. Like you said, the ego comes into play, or people don't want to take the time to get a partner who's an expert in those areas.
It's a shame. Like, because of the page's name, right? The page's name is McDojo Life, right? So I have to deal with like McDojo. So the first thing I had to do with starting McDojo Life was you have to define a problem to solve a problem. If you can't define it, there's no way to solve it, because you don't even know what the problem is. Yeah. And I noticed online people's version of what a McDojo was completely askew. Like, they would talk a lot about the things that are not really measurable. They would say, oh, that's a McDojo because they charge too much. Well, what is too much? That's subjective to the individual and how much they can afford. So there is no real too much. It's just, is that valuable enough for you to want to spend money on it, that much money? So that can't be the definition, because that's so subjective. Or they'd be like, oh, this person's not very good. Okay, well, let's measure skill. How do we measure that skill? Well, you could win in a local tournament and get completely crushed everywhere else. Well, that means locally you're still the best. So your skill is subjective to where you are and who you're competing against and what the situation is. So like, that can't really be it. And what if we're talking about someone with cerebral palsy, someone morbidly obese, someone who had a stroke? Technically, they're going to have to work twice as hard as an able-bodied person. And while they'll never be as skilled, most likely, they're still working harder to dedicate themselves even more to something than the able-bodied person to get at least somewhat mediocre results. So are we saying they're not a black belt because they can't beat someone up? In my opinion, they're more of a black belt because of how much time, effort, and energy they dedicated to something and overcame all of these odds to put something into this that they know they'll never be able to get as much out of it. And so all these things are just, they're weird, like definitions. So over the years, figuring out what the definitions might be kind of came down to like 5 rules, right? The first one is unsafe training practices and cult-like behavior. If your coach is making you stand there and just take shots to the head and they're conditioning you, that coach is a moron. find a new coach because you're just going to get brain damage early and you're probably never going to be that great, right?
Mhm.
The cult-like behavior you see even in jiu-jitsu, like people whipping each other with belts as a promotion. Like, does that make you better at jiu-jitsu? No. Does it make you worse if you don't do it? No. What's the point? Because someone before you did it and you got convinced that somehow this made you more of a in the crowd or a part of this deal than people who didn't. So you feel obligated to do this hazing, even though it's nonsensical and doesn't do anything for you other than make you feel like you're now a part of this group who also got whipped. I can't think of any other place other than BDSM where I'd pay somebody to get whipped.
Well, yeah.
Or like so the other ones are getting taken advantage of financially. Like if someone's upfront with their pricing, they tell you you're going to have to pay for a testing, they tell you you're going to have to pay all these fees, and you sign up anyway, that's on you. But if magically fees come out of nowhere, magically you're getting ripped off, magically prices change without true consent, that is shady business practices, and then you should probably go somewhere else. What else? Mislabeling technique and no-touch knockouts. So like if you go to a cardio kickboxing facility and they tell you this is a cardio kickboxing facility, you're going to be doing cardio kickboxing, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't care if it's to a beat and everybody's doing it at the same time and you're not the world's greatest kickboxer. Who gives a shit? They never told you were going to be. But if they turn around and say you're going to be now a professional kickboxer because you're doing cardio kickboxing, they're lying to you. That's not what that's for. It's mislabeling, it's misleading, and it can give you a false insecurity and get you hurt. And clearly can't knock people out with your mind.
I'm dying to do a documentary on no-touch knockouts. I find it to be I like weird things like that in terms of how people believe it. I'm fascinated by the psychology behind it, so I'm definitely going to deep dive into that one.
Yeah, we are. We've been working on a documentary for 4 years.
Really?
Like not just no-touch knockouts, but the entirety of like martial arts cults and the power dynamics of instructors and how they take advantage of students. And obviously, this is just speaking of the ones who do. Not everyone does that. Martial arts can be an amazing thing for a lot of people, but unfortunately, the bad eggs mix in with the good eggs very well, and sometimes it's hard to spot if you've not trained before. So
you had said you had could consistently put out 3 stories a week about predators taking advantage of kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you just go to Google, right? I'll do it right now while we're talking. Karate arrested. That's all I'll type in. Let's see here. This is just right off the top. New video shows police question karate instructor accused of sexually assaulting an underage child. Karate instructor accused of molesting a 9-year-old. Orange County karate instructor arrested, charged with battery and lewd and lascivious molestation. Authorities release a video of case of karate instructor assaulting underage child. I just typed it in. Like all of this is,
and that's just karate. You didn't even type in a martial artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's and great. Like just to give you an idea, this is the first one 3 days ago, 4 days ago, 4 days ago, 4 days ago, 1 month ago. Like and again, that is just karate. And I think most people are usually looking for confirmation bias. So like we typically don't look up things to prove us wrong. We typically look up things to prove us right. And I think most people want to believe that martial arts is good. So what they do is they spend their time worrying about how they can get better at martial arts. They look up tutorials, videos on fighting, things that are fun, good fun content. Most people don't spend a lot of time looking into the fact that there is some kind of a weird record number of sexual offenders.
I have never in my life searched it or thought about searching it.
Because who would?
I watched tutorials and exactly what you said, competitions and fighting.
Yeah, like you want it to be fun because we love it, right? But we forget that it's unregulated completely. Like people don't even think about this. Like martial arts, especially in the United States, has no regulatory body at all. You don't need a background check to become an instructor. You don't need a background check to be in someone's martial arts facility. You don't need CPR first aid certification, even though you're in a sport that is guaranteed to make at least one person get injured eventually. So you should probably have that. You don't need concussion training. So like what winds up happening is we're in a sport where we're hitting each other in the head if you're doing striking, if you're doing striking that involves hitting to the head, because there's arts that don't do that. But if you're getting hit in the head often, don't you think that we should, as an instructor, be obligated to understand what that's doing to our students or ourselves? But we don't.
So, I mean, I'm glad that there's more awareness, because growing up in martial arts, I trained in some tough gyms, and like dudes would get knocked out and get up and keep sparring. And I'm like, by looking back today, I'm like, that dude had a concussion, got up and kept sparring in the gym. Like, you're not even in a competition. What's the point of that? That's absolutely insane. That's for sure cumulative brain damage.
Yeah.
So you were telling you were on point number 3 or 4 of what a McDojo is. I want to.
I think we talked about unsafe training practices and cult-like behavior. We talked about mislabeling technique and no-touch knockouts. We talked about shady business practices.
Yep.
The next one was unsafe training practices, right? So anything that's just doing harm to your students that does them no good. That's really what's unsafe. If you're doing something like martial arts, there is some risk involved, but usually the risk has a reward associated with it. So like if I do spar, there should be some like, oh, well, I'm getting better at this because now I'm simulating a fight, and hopefully eventually that will lead me to be more comfortable in an actual exchange. I'm not getting so damaged here that by the time I get to a street fight that I have a broken arm. Well, now I can't defend myself.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I just got knocked out. Well, now it's easier for me to get knocked out later on. Like, it should be beneficial. And then the last one's lying about your belt rank or your fight record. Whenever you go to a martial arts facility as a first-time student, it's usually the second question that people ask. The first question is, how much does it cost? But the second question is, what qualifies you? Why should I talk to you? What am I going to learn here? And that's when you learn about your instructor. Okay, well, I've been doing this for X amount of time. This is what you're going to learn, and this is why I'm an authority in that art. Doesn't mean you're an authority in all aspects fighting. It just means that you know that art, right? Whether it's applicable in a street fight or not doesn't matter. If they're going to get something out of the deal. And if they're going to lie to you right off the bat, chances are good they're going to lie to you about just about everything else that you're about to learn. Because that's the easiest question to answer and not lie about. Like, you've dedicated your whole life to this thing. You don't need to make up a fight record. You don't need to make up training regimen. You don't need to make any of that up. Hell, you don't even need to be that good. You could literally say, hey, I'm a white belt. I started last week. I know maybe 3 things. I just opened this school for giggles. And that's all I know. And if they told you that, I would see nothing wrong with it. Why? Because they were honest with you, and you as a consumer can make a decision whether or not you want to train with this person or not. Yeah. That would be like a club where everybody's of equal rank and just like rolling around playing, and they just have to pay for a space together. Who gives a shit? It's when they lie to you about that. That's when you start to run into major issues, because now they're being an authority about something they don't know about. That could get you hurt, which I've seen happen over the years. It could be something as simple as they don't teach you how to throw a hook properly and you're ripping your shoulder. Or they're going too rough because they want to teach you how to be tough because they don't know how to make you better. So they decide to beat on you and go, well, if he can take this, you can take a real fight. Like, maybe if you ever make it there without the multiple concussions and without the major injuries, and let's say hypothetically you don't hurt me during this class and I don't get to choose when I get to fight. So if you break my arm now, I could be going to the grocery store tonight with a broken arm and a sling and then have to defend myself. How good am I going to be then? So those are the 5 basic rules of what a McDojo is. And they stay away from opinions. Like, none of that is opinion based. All of that is factual based. And I think that's something that's important in the industry.
Yeah, it all comes down to being transparent.
Mostly, yeah.
It's a good motto. All right, I got some martial arts here for you to watch. I mean, by your criteria, none of them would fit the McDojo philosophy, because that comes down to the individual and the school based on your criteria. It's not the system itself. It's
no, typically most systems, I'd say there's probably only a few systems that I would label as completely bullshit all the way across. Kyoshu Jitsu is completely 100% bullshit nonsense. Kyoshu Jitsu is George Dillman's art.
Oh yeah, where you lift up your toe to stop yourself from getting knocked out.
Like,
I love that.
It's nonsense. We actually interviewed for our documentary 4 the high-level Kyoshu Jitsu practitioners, like 8th degree, 10th degree guys. And each one of them, we asked a very simple question. Since the art is based off of acupuncture, Chinese acupuncture charts, are any of you certified acupuncturists? Have any of you gone to school for acupuncture? Universally, it was no. So it's like, not only did you make some bullshit up, but then after you made some bullshit up and you believed it, you didn't even decide to like actually learn like
Yeah,
the
I think
legitimate.
it's based off of amazing.
Yeah, like you didn't take that much time. Like that would, I would imagine that would be the prerequisite. You know,
Yeah.
like what do? I'm a boxing coach. How many boxing matches you ever had? I don't box. Like, what?
Yeah, it's amazing. You got to be impressed though that it kind of it still got out there, the Dillman stuff, for a while. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they have this. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but they have this very interesting way to speak to people to almost make them believe it. It's very much cult speech how they talk. Adam Misner's probably another one. He does Heaven, Man, Earth. And Adam Misner has these like the way that he speaks is very much like that movie Mystery Men. If you've ever seen Mystery Men, there's a character on that movie called the Sphinx. And all he does is talk in circles, but everybody thinks that he's very wise because of the way he speaks. And it's
Is
like
Ben Stiller in that movie? Am I crazy?
Yes, that's an old Ben Stiller.
Yeah, I remember that movie. Yeah.
But he'll say some stuff like, you know, if you don't control your anger will control you. So he just talks in a circle, right? Adam Misner does the same thing, but he does it and charges people for it, and they think he's so deep. And then the universal question to his students are, can any of you replicate what he does? Because if I go to one Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and we work on a rear naked choke, at least 10 minutes in that class, by the time we leave, I can replicate a rear naked choke on someone.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be the greatest, but I could probably choke somebody with a rear naked choke if they allowed me to do so, standing still, no resistance. But none of them can replicate what he does. And I'm like, how long you been training with this guy? I don't know, like 7 years. And you can't replicate any of the shit he does. And you
Adam Misner, I got to look this dude up.
Oh, yeah. Couch jitsu all day. Couch jitsu. The dude's like on the couch and he's like 1 gram of pressure and he'll like touch the guy.
Oh, you put a video of him maybe that I saw on your channel. Yeah, he's very, very funny. And he's like, it's not effective because it's soft or something. It's effective because it's right. Is that the guy who says some kind of weird? And I'm like, what am I watching?
It's not soft and it's not heavy. It's correct. It's like
that's what he's talking about. Okay, like, thank you very much.
You know, like it's not a gram of pressure. Like you don't measure pressure with grams, brother. Like this is that's weight. Like, it's not. All right. Anyway, yeah, he's a wacko.
All right, so I got some styles here for you. I guess I will just take your opinions on what you think of these styles. So I'm not going to give my opinion on whether I think they're good or not. I'm going to your expertise on these. Okay, so we're going to jump into the first one. The first one's Kyokushin. Yeah, we'll play a little bit over here in the background.
Yeah, man. So this one, some of the arts that you were showing me a little bit earlier as like a warm-up kind of helped me like keep in perspective how I was going to do this. But the thing that a lot of people crap on in martial arts, for some reason, people love to crap on karate. They forget Kyokushin exists. Now, in Kyokushin rules, you can't punch to the head. So if you notice, there's a lot of body shots for any out there who don't know what Kyokushin is. You don't punch to the body or to the head. You can punch as hard as you want to the body. You can kick as hard as you want. Like, it is brutal. There's even a thing out there, by the way, called the low kick championship. Mm-hmm. And the low kick championship has guys from Muay Thai, different arts, who basically just stand in a position and they kick kicks to the leg from each other. One guy kicks, the other guy kicks. Kyokushin almost every time wins in these low kicking championships, which you would imagine would probably be more Muay Thai. But for some reason, Kyokushin dominates there. Kyokushin is a lot of body conditioning. It's the competition rule set is very brutal. You have Masoyama, who did like the 30-man kumite.
100-man. They say he did a 400-man kumite, but the 100-man kumite there has been accomplished by now, like 25 fighters. I think it's crazy.
But the 100-man kumite is brutal. It is a very, very brutal test where basically you're doing exactly what you're seeing on the screen versus fresh 100. And by fresh, probably like 20 dudes that keep getting rotated in. But if you get knocked out, it's over. If you get knocked down, it's over. Like your kumite is done. So basically at the moment you quit, it's over. And a lot of people don't make it. That's why there's only been like 20 to ever do it.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's that high. Yeah, I threw out a number, but I know like it was a big deal when what's his name did it? A monster guy's built like a tree trunk. He has a documentary.
Yeah, I saw that. He documented it as well.
Yeah, you realize how tough it is. It's for sure less than 20 actually.
But I have a lot of respect for Kyokushin. I think Kyokushin is a fantastic art. It's a lot of conditioning. Guys like Baz Rutten is a Kyokushin black belt. GSP is a Kyokushin black belt. When people talk about karate, a lot of times they forget Kyokushin is even a thing. Or they think of point fighting. They don't think about full contact Kyokushin, which is very brutal. And I do like the fact also that they don't punch to the head. And I know that might seem odd, but I would think that's probably the thing that is lacking in terms of self-defense. I think it is important that you put gloves on and you do know what it's like for people to punch you in the head. But if you're practicing this and you're worried about getting CTE or a TBI, if you're a child looking to get into martial arts, you don't want to just take a bunch of blows to the head over and over and over and over again. This might be a little bit for you. It is rough, but at the same time, it does save you from that CTE, because again, even with kicks like that, we're not taking repeated blows. And if you look up CTE, you get it from consistently getting hit in the head over and over and over again. And then one last note on that before I turn it over, I'm sorry, is was it Floyd? No, it was Roy Jones Jr. was talking about a training partner when he first got into boxing. And the guy was clearly punch drunk. He had CTE. And he said the advice that he was given was, don't treat your sparring like it's full contact fighting. He goes, I'm not this way, meaning about the way he was speaking and the way he was holding himself because of the CTE. He goes, I'm not this way because of fighting. He goes, sparring made me this way.
Yeah, so, it's the gym wars.
Yeah. So people forget, like, sparring can mess you up because you're getting hit over and over and over and over and over again. You got to figure that into your longevity as a human. So yeah, I think Kyokushin's great.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, they do have now a lot of tournaments where you can punch to the head in Kyokushin, but yeah, you look at the main Kyokushin tournaments, they don't, but the offshoots and like Daido, like if you look at Kudo and all of those, they do. But yeah, Kyokushin guys are obviously not as developed in that area as boxing or Dutch kickboxing or all those systems. But I love Kyokushin, but that's it. We'll move on.
Kudo's pretty dope too. Kudo's the one with the full face mask.
Yeah, the space helmet.
Yeah, I got you. And then I think takedowns are allowed in Kudo as well. Like it's a little bit more MMA, but like
it's MMA with headbutts, and it's like almost like combat sambo. It's more explosive. The rounds are much shorter. You win by aggression. It almost simulates a street fight a little bit more than MMA because the skill level, I would argue, is different. It's much more explosive, aggressive. You just don't see MMA guys come in running at each other, charging full speed with like flying headbutts. You know what I mean? Because they're trying to last more than a minute. And in Kudo, they don't really care. But there's all types of offshoots of Kyokushin. There's Enshin, Ashihara, which allow you to grip and do takedowns. There's what's it? It's not Seidokan or whatever it is. They have like a whole series of competition, bare knuckle to the head, which I wouldn't recommend. It's kind of like left way. So they have, but yeah, the most popular form of Kyokushin is this.
Yeah, this is what my mind goes to for sure.
All right, curious what you think of Aikido.
There's difficulties in Aikido. Like, for one, with jiu-jitsu, there's been a resurgence of wrist locks, right? People love doing wrist locks on people in jiu-jitsu, and they always like call it like cheap or whatever. But at one point, before Dean Lister anyway, people were calling leg locks cheap and jiu-jitsu. And then when Dean Lister was like, why would I ignore them? The famous quote, why would I ignore 50% of the human body, right? And then that changed the dynamic landscape of how we look at jiu-jitsu, especially no-gi jiu-jitsu now. But wrist locks are a thing. There is a shitload of wrist locks in Aikido. That is great. Getting a standing wrist lock on somebody is pretty much damn near impossible. Is it possible? Yes. What are the odds of you getting a standing wrist lock on a resisting opponent? Very low. Especially if we're dealing with things like no grips. If they're just trying to do it straight off the wrist, if you're just trying to do it with a resisting opponent, chances are you're not going to get it. But you will open up ideas, or you might open up holes in someone else's game by reaching for the wrist and they pull away. Well, now that gives you an opportunity to move in for something else. But my opinion is I think that Aikido's ideology when it first started was solid. I think O Sensei had a very good understanding of how martial arts could help you outside of just martial arts. I think that's what he wanted. I think he was looking for giving people a way to go through the motions without being combative, But I think like most martial artists that live to his age in that position of power, especially like if you look at the guy who runs Bujinkan, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, eventually what happens is they wind up becoming this bigger than life figure and they have to make a decision. Do I tell people the truth or do I go with the legendary stories that they tell me? There's stories about O-sensei disarming like 10 dudes who had rifles pointed at him, right? That's bullshit. That never happened, but it's perpetuated. There's video online of O-sensei moving his hands and knocking people down without touching them. You can just watch it. It's like he's doing this no-touch bullshit, but it was perpetuated, and these stories got perpetuated. And then I think, unfortunately, I think that winds up watering it down because then the next in line want to feel the same. Like, well, he was this legend, and now I have to fill those shoes, so now I'm going to have to make sure that I step up and people have legends about me, and so on. I think that there's value to it if you're not looking to learn combat through Aikido. I think there's value to wanting to be a part of a group, to moving your body if you want to lose some weight, if you want to learn the traditionalism because they still participate in Hakama, if you want to learn maybe some traditional Japanese, like if you want to go through the motions, that's fine. If you're looking for Aikido to be a self-defense art, it's just not that. And the closest we had, I think, to really showing that off as a self-defense art was Steven Seagal. Unfortunately, when he did that, he also was like getting accused of molesting women and like loves himself so much that he has probably the biggest ego in the martial arts. Like it's legendary how egocentric he is.
And I also think he's an Aikijitsu guy, not an Aikido guy. I think he comes from like the old school where they still whack each other and like, or is he an Aikido guy? I'm not sure. I always thought he was an Aikijitsu.
Sure he's Aikido. Like there's old footage of him. Like one of the first like woo-woo things I ever saw Seagal do. It was introduced as Aikido. And when he talks about it, like he's like, basically two guys go to pick him up and he's like, now try to pick me up and they can't. It's just an old magic trick. Or he's like, look, I'm going to hold back these three guys with one finger. And he does that also, just a parlor trick. Like he had this woo-woo about him. But at the same time, what he was showing in film was things that could possibly be applicable. And like, especially his early films where he was actually still in kind of good shape. Like his first three were dope. Above the Law was great. Like,
I think Under Siege is amazing.
Under Siege is great. Like,
but he's a douchebag human being. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. And unfortunately, I think that could have been the person to elevate that art. And if you look at like 1993 with the UFC forced a lot of these arts to elevate. And I think we're going through a martial arts renaissance now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but if you look at karate, there's been an evolution. Like look at Stephen Thompson, Michael Venom Page, these guys who Raymond Daniels, point fighters who have been able to use what they've learned in point fighting effectively in MMA. I mean,
Lyoto Machida really kind of started pushing the Shotokan popularity in MMA, and like you started seeing people all of a sudden front kicks became effective. They weren't until, you know what I mean? Like I always find that weird. Joe Rogan gets super excited over something that traditional martial artists have been doing for 100 years because he saw it once in the UFC suddenly, and then everyone thinks it's effective. Or like calf kicks were not something that was unheard of in a lot of other systems, and then all of a sudden they became the staple of MMA.
Yeah, like a basic front kick, a teep, like doing, like you don't see a lot of guys throwing a basic front kick in MMA, which is odd, but like that's such an advantageous technique. It makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to want to shoot in on you because now the kick is now face level if they were kicking you in the chest or the sternum or the solar plexus. Now it makes me a little bit more leery about putting my hands farther down because that could come right up the middle and right to my chin. It changes the dynamic, but back to Aikido, I think that there's benefits, but I don't think the benefits are for self-defense.
I want to show you Tomiki Aikido, which is a pressure-tested form of Aikido. And they do it with weapons. You can see he's holding like a fake knife, but they also do it without weapons. Here, they're both empty. Oh, no, he's holding a fake weapon here. And you have to disarm and take him down. And fully resisting. But it's... I don't know. The empty hand looks like judo more than anything.
I mean, even with something like this, like the difficulty here is obviously there is some type of a rule set that is not allowing whoever has the weapon to fully engage the way that you would engage. Like you notice that they're just kind of milling around. Getting cut with a knife fucking sucks. Like I write about this in my book. I've been stabbed before, and it sucks. There's nothing fun about it. And once you get cut, it changes the dynamic of what that is. And because that's not an actual weapon, it makes it so much easier for him to just run in. Like that dynamic would drastically change, and the technique and how you would throw it would drastically change if that was a sharp weapon. The only unfortunate part is, how can you really make that something that you could train?
Shock knife, maybe, or, you know, the shock knives do work. I like using shock knives. But I mean, at least I find what they're doing is against an unarmed person, it's almost like modified judo what they're doing.
I think that what they're doing is much better than the whole, like, with a basic Aikido, right? It's a lot of like arm coming down, like up based off of like a bokken or a sword coming down, right? You see a lot of that in Aikido. That would be great in certain situations, but like I do like this a little bit better from what I'm seeing. I don't know anything about this art other than what I'm seeing and what I'm being told right now, so I can't give an in-depth opinion about it. I don't know this art as well as I understand the history of Aikido, but I think that what I'm seeing here is at least an attempt to pressure test, and pressure testing is so important to make anything effective. And like, if we ever get to Krav Maga, I have like a Krav Maga story, but like
I didn't put it on the list. I didn't put it on the list, but you
well, I taught a seminar one time at a Krav Maga studio. And I went out there to teach kickboxing. That's specifically what I was teaching. Nothing more than that. And when I asked everybody to go and get their shin pads on, gloves, and mouthpiece, they all put their shin pads on and they left their shoes on. And I was like, hey, guys, go ahead and take off your shoes. They were like, what? They were blown away by this. And I was like, at the end of the sparring session, or at the end of the seminar, which is 3 hours, everyone had blisters on the bottom of their feet. There wasn't a one person in that room that did not have blisters on their feet. And which goes to show that they never trained with their shoes off. So when we sat down, I asked them some questions, and some things blew me away. And the reason I bring it up is because of pressure testing. I go, why do you guys train with your shoes on? And they go, well, in the street, you're probably going to have your shoes on. And I was like, that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you're at your house and I don't put my shoes on when I take my shoes off. I'm chilling on my couch. So if I have to defend myself in my house, I'm probably going to be barefoot. I'm not going to take the time to put my shoes on. If I'm at the beach, which I live 15 minutes from the beach, and I've lived in Florida, so that means I'm probably going to be wearing flip-flops, which are not going to stay on during a fight, or I'm probably barefoot at the beach. So training with shoes on is best case scenario. So that means you guys have never truly pressure tested the worst case scenario, which is you don't have shoes on. And now because of that, you can feel what's going on with the bottom of your feet. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do any better on concrete barefoot. My feet are probably going to get tore up, but they're not going to get nearly as torn up as their feet. At least I can prove that because of that. Or another fun thing about pressure testing, the whole there are no rules on the street concept, which is also a Krav Maga thing that is usually perpetuated. There are no rules on the street. That is bullshit. Whoever said that is just fucking wrong. There are rules on the street. They're called laws, and they operate exactly like rules in competition. If I break a rule in competition, there is a direct result or consequence. If I break a law in the street, there is a direct consequence. If I don't get caught, whether it's breaking the rule on the mat or breaking the rule on the street, I don't get caught. There is no punishment. So, like, there are rules on the street. They're called laws.
The problem is that most people who are looking for a victim, if we're looking at like real survival type situations, right? Like you're in an alley and two guys jump you. They're already by nature of the action they're taking not following the law. And their intention is not to follow the law. Their intention is to crush you and potentially kill you. And
exactly. And that same thing can be done. And there's a million examples. Like one example is at ADCC. It was 2 years ago at ADCC. There was a match that got out of hand, and an instructor, a coach, pulled out a knife on the mat and rushed at someone. They didn't care about the rules of the mat, but they still were willing to break them. But those rules still operated the exact same way. That guy had a lifetime ban. He had to deal with the police because not only did he break the rules of competition, he also broke the law. And so there are consequences to these things. So while we could ignore rules on the mat and we can ignore the law, that doesn't mean that we can ignore the consequences that will come after. And so there are rules on the street, and we should be prepared for those, and we should understand what they are. But doesn't mean you can't break them. You can break it. You can break them anytime you want.
There's something that actually annoys me with a lot of, look, I carry. I'm a huge fan of firearms. But when I'm teaching self-defense, or even when I put out videos of like situational stuff, there's always a bunch of people. Oh, I'll use my 9mm. I'm ready to shoot, whatever. And I'm like, if that's really the reality, you would have already shot 100 people. Like, you're not willing to just shoot everyone who opens their mouth at you or who grabs you, or there has to be a commensurate, or whatever the word is, level of force and threat. At least for me, I don't want to end up in jail for the rest of my life. For me to take out my firearm and kill somebody, because that's the only reason I'm taking it out, is to kill you. There's no other situation. I'm not brandishing it. I'm not trying to shoot you in the knee. I'm shooting you center mass, and I'm emptying the magazine, and then I'm neutralizing whatever threat I believe was worthy of me taking out my gun. So it's like, and the fact that I have a gun in play at all times when something escalates actually makes me want to de-escalate, because I know there's a firearm in play, even though it's mine.
It reminds me of like if someone is watching a television show they don't like, right? And there's this thing in front of them that they don't like. You could just change the channel. But the equivalent is, oh, I would just break my TV, bro. I just break the TV. Now I don't have to watch it. It's like, why is that comparison even here? Like, first of all, most people that I've ever heard make that argument don't train. If they do train, they don't understand the 5 basic rules of gun safety, which one of them you just explained. I'm not going to aim my firearm at something I don't plan to destroy. And destroy is the word. I'm going to fucking destroy that thing if I'm pointing my gun at it. I'm not just doing it, like you said, to show it off. That's not what a firearm is for. It's not a fucking toy. It's not a threat. It's an answer. It's an answer to an immediate threat that could get me killed. And I need this tool to stop that other thing from killing me. That's it. And I don't know. That mentality is just so odd to me. And again, I'm not crapping on all Krav Maga, but I figured we'd bring it up since we were talking about pressure testing and this false sense of reality that sometimes can be perpetuated by like, oh, in the streets, you're going to have shoes. And the best case scenario, I will. Worst case, I'm wearing flip-flops or I'm barefoot and it's going to suck ass. Or like,
before we started, I was telling you my feet are torn up from what I was doing outside on the hot textured mats, which I just put in.
It fucking sucks. But that's reality. And reality sucks sometimes, but in my opinion, like with the 2 contrasting styles that you just showed between Aikido and what was the other art that you just showed? It was something at
Kyokushin.
No.
Aikijitsu. Or Tomiki Aikido was the.
There you go. One. Yeah, like there's another art. It's the Daito Ru Akijitsu or Akijutsu, and that has a lot of woo-woo in it. You see a lot of like, that's the videos where the guy is sitting on his knees, the guy gets his head touched and he moves his head and the guy flies like 50 feet. You get guys like Roy Goldberg who were doing things like that. Like a little tiny guy, he's like 4'11" or so. Somebody reaches up and grabs him and he moves his shoulder and the guy like flies 10 feet in the air. Like, that's bullshit. Like, and unfortunately they believe this, and that's a detriment because now you're perpetuating a cycle of lineage. He's the guy in charge. He's teaching people to do this, and those people are believing it. Then he dies, they take over, and they just keep the bullshit going. And that's a shame.
There's a mentalist, Darren Brown, who did a whole segment on the no-touch knockout. It's pretty interesting.
I love that. I've seen that. I love that bit, too. Hopefully other people go watch it because it's very fascinating. But he's using mentalism
to recreate no-touch knockout. Yeah, and he's incredible. All right. We'll do a couple more styles just for time. I got one here. Look at Hapkido. Hapkido! I like Korean martial arts. I don't know. I've never trained Hapkido, but I'll let you.
So the only experience I ever really had with a Hapkido, other than obviously footage, is like when you go through like the sport karate circuits, you will have a lot of Hapkido guys. Hapkido guys, like some other sport martial arts. Obviously, Hapkido was not particularly made for sport. It was supposed to be made as a self-defense art. Oh, well, there you go. There's some self-defense right there. But a lot of guys will compete and they'll do like point. It was hit or miss. Some guys were good and some guys weren't. I don't know much about the curriculum in terms of like what exactly they're teaching. Like I might some of the other arts, but I mean, I think it's cool that they're trying to diversify a little bit, at least with what they're doing. But unless I had more understanding of it, I wouldn't be able to give a solid opinion. It just kind of has a Taekwondo feel from what I'm looking at.
Yeah, he's kicking. It looks like Taekwondo mixed with Aikido mixed with some judo, to be honest to me.
Yeah, if I had more of a basis for what I would be talking about here, I'd probably be able to give an opinion. But as of right now, it just kind of feels like Taekwondo with some self-defense.
I like this kick right here that he throws to the leg. Wait, let me see if this is. He can kick, this guy. I mean, like, he's flexible. You can tell his legs are strong. He has good control. But he did a kick to the guy's thigh, which looked nice. I think it's right. A toe kick to the thigh. That probably hurts. I don't know.
I mean,
random. I've never
what is it?
Toe kick the
Savat, right? So
Yeah.
like it, like Savat, made for people who were wearing shoes. Like the whole art was based around people wearing hard-toed shoes, businessmen who were just getting mugged, and someone was like, "Hey, I can teach you how to use them shoes." Like, so there's a lot of toe kicks there, but I wouldn't personally kick someone to the shin that way. But
I've trained with some Savat guys who were just so sneaky at like sport. That's a weird kick too that he just did.
that was with the heel.
Weird. Yeah, he outward heel kicked.
Strange. I mean, when I'm sparring with people, sometimes I'll throw like little fun shots at the leg like that just to get attention or just to like play. But I don't know, like that would work. Just
grab the leg and stab the guy in the stomach would work.
That works every time. So there you were punching. So I came out stabbing, and it's a problem solved.
All right, we got one more here.
Small joint manipulation is cool. It's just it's more for show anyway. You can't really train it. It's not something you need to train. You can just tell people, just grab their finger at any time, and now you know small joint.
Yeah, and bend it as hard as you can in any direction, and it's a ninjutsu right here.
This looks like Bujinkan mostly because of the patch. So Bujinkan has just the leader of Bujinkan's name is Hatsumi Sensei. And Hatsumi Sensei now, if he's even still alive, the last videos I've seen of him, he kind of has purple hair. And his art was like every other martial art, right? It went up to 10th degree black belt. And then out of nowhere, he decided, well, we're going to do 11 degree black belt, right? And then, but originally the highest was 10th and you can only have one, which was him. And everyone else, the highest you can get was 9th until he died. And then there would be a successor, right? Like you would name a successor. Well, then out of nowhere, he's like, nah, everybody can have 10th degree. So then everybody gets 10th degree, right? Of course, there's a test and a fee. But then out of nowhere, he's like, you know what? Let's just go to 12th. So then now in the Bujinkan, now you have up to 12th degree black belt. It's based on I think what they call the 9 schools. And each school, one is Budo Taijutsu. There's other ones for the weapons and stuff like that. So there's different schools of this that you learn. But a lot of it is fairly nonsensical.
Wait, look at this over here. I really like this moment. We're going to have to watch it. Wait, you ready? Here we go. Jumps guard, hammer fist to the head. It takes the guy
that didn't work out for Kron Gracie this last fight. That's all I'm saying. It didn't work like that at all. There's strange things in Bujinkan as well, like the Saki test. So the Saki test is the 5th degree black belt test for the Bujinkan, I do believe. And what winds up happening is you go in front of a room. By the way, this is almost verbatim how they explain it. So you go up in front of a room of your peers and you sit in a seiza position and you look away from the instructor, usually the head, which is 9 times out of 10, it was Hatsumi, but now he's showing other people how to do the test. And they take a shinai usually, and it goes above the head, and they are supposed to come down and crack you on the head. And you're not supposed to use any of your senses. You're not supposed to use your sight, sound, any of that. You're supposed to use this other sense. Again, this is almost verbatim to how they explain it. Feel free to look it up. There's a whole video of this guy explaining it, and I've said it so many times, it's almost ingrained in my head. But you're supposed to feel their killing intent, and you're supposed to dodge it by moving out of the way, by feeling this, right? And they specifically said, this is not any other senses but your sense of feel. And the reason I've asked multiple people in the Bujinkan to do this to me, allow me to do this to you. Let me try to crack you on the head. Because I guarantee you I hit you every fucking time. But they were like, this is actually a thing that you're supposed to be projecting your intent. And they're supposed to be trying to sense that intent. So if you don't both do this, and if I'm not projecting,
work.
Yes, exactly. It's I promise you, I'll be trying to hit you in the head. I will be projecting that feeling because I really want to hit you in the head with a stick.
Yeah.
but that's a nonsensical test. It's nonsense, right? So anyone who's like a 5th degree or above in the Bujinkan has taken this test. And there'll be people who try to defend it. There'll be people who are like, well, I just went through the motions. Like, you're perpetuating it by doing that. If you don't believe that that has some value, just simply don't do it. But they perpetuate it and they pass it on because it's more traditional.
Another thing, you can't move up in the system
unless you do it.
Yeah, and there's some things in systems I have trained that I highly disagree with, but I'm like, okay, it's such a small part of the system. I'm just going to get through it. I understand it's there for tradition and history, and I'll accept it for what it is. Like, even within the karate world, a lot of the formal, it'll come back to here, right? You'll be coming up, you'll be doing these kind of big blocks. Now, in reality, I'm not doing those. Everything is tight. You look at Kyokushin guys, the way they train here versus they come out like this. And so it's like, and there are reasons for it. They'll say the kata is, you are learning how to torque. You are learning how to throw somebody, even subconsciously. This is a throwing motion. I mean, there are explanations for what kata, but let's be honest, it's tradition.
Well, some of it is, I think, where things get lost in the sauce when it comes to kata is the Boon Kai. And for anyone who doesn't know, Boon Kai is basically application. How are these movements going to apply to what I'm really doing? And if you learn one kata from the same kata from 5 different instructors, you might actually get 5 different applications of what they believe. Like, for instance, a lot of people will treat this as an out block. No one fucking does that, right? But if you see John Jones get an overhook and he wrenches the arm, well, now that's application to what it is.
It is this motion. I teach that. Actually, my instructional teaches that. I show literally you drop low and you come up like this, which looks like a karate movement, of course.
Yeah, it's more like an Americana.
What?
It's
like a shoulder rip. It's like a modified shoulder rip. It is an Americana angle, but it's because of a loose underhook. You know, like when people, like wrestlers, a lot of the time will hold their underhook like this, as opposed to kind of turning and getting you torque. And once the elbow's low line with me having an overhook, if I can drop and torque.
Yeah.
It's actually what happened to Sean Strickland against what's his name? The guy who died, Sanchez. It was his last name. Good grappler, thick, short guy, fat. He passed away.
Oh yeah, Orlando
Sanchez.
While they were sparring,
he did a rip. I just call it a rip. I call it an overhook rip because of a loose underhook. And he literally said that. He's like, I'm trying to show you have a loose underhook. He did do it hard enough to hurt Sean Strickland before a fight. There's 2 sides to that story, unfortunately, the overreaction and everything. But I don't speak ill of the dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But I think my opinion about that, I think karate has a lot of bad name because of people who show poor Boon Kai, bad applications. Well, that's bullshit. That's not what that is. That will never work. You're never going to do it yourself. So why teach it? But the reason I bring it up for this is because in the Saki test, I think would have validity if you didn't do it in the same environment. If you could show that someone is going to follow you that day, they can even let them know today will be the day. So you can even have a little bit of understanding that this might happen to you. Today is the day, or someone out of nowhere is going to pop out and try to whack you on the head. And they did it out of nowhere. And you weren't expecting it at that moment, and you still dodged out of the way, there might be validity there. But you're in a controlled environment where Hatsumi himself has shown many times that he will pass people on purpose or fail people on purpose based off of how he likes them. It's he'll purposely slow down for certain people, and you can watch it in the videos, or he'll purposely raise real high to create a sound or create a reaction from the audience who's watching him. And when he raises up, they look. And so now the person who's sitting down knows to move out of the way. There's a lot of this bullshit. And they're like, no, I felt it. It's like, no, you didn't. You were manipulated by an old man who's good at manipulating people.
Well, they felt the air moving. They felt like you're talking about these small sounds.
Yeah.
They felt the vibration in the floor. It is a sensitivity test in the very nature of what it is. But that if they were just transparent about that, hey, we're going to put you in a situation where you have to be in an almost meditative state to be hyper aware of your senses to react to this specific thing. And the entire point of this test is to see how sensitive you can be. Then I could, what you're talking about, transparency. you could argue that that is a transparent exercise for a very specific thing to see if you can go into that headspace. But it's not. They're talking about this new sense that doesn't exist.
And that's a shame, because I think that does a disservice to the student base. And I think that, again, like you said, if it was explained the way that you just said it, and it was presented that way, would have no problem with it whatsoever. I'm like, I think it's kind of dumb, but I mean, at least you have like a solid reasoning behind why you're doing it. But like this whole, I have to project my energy, right? And then you're going to feel my energy. And then we're both energizing at the same time, or it doesn't work. It's just a crock of shit.
It goes into the realm of no touch knockout.
Exactly. But yeah, like the Bujinkan's weird. They do weird shit like that. They also have like this weird prayer that they do at the beginning of like classes. They have like a shrine, and then you have to do this prayer. And it's like, why do I have to do that? Like, well, we just do. It's like, what if I don't want to, but you have to? Like, what?
I hate anything religious related to martial arts. I think it's totally, Silat, unfortunately, has a lot of religious connotation behind it. And I'm like, I don't think the two should be connected. One is a martial art, one is a religion.
I agree.
You might use martial arts to defend your religion. That's fine. But, if you're trying to propagate your art throughout the world, there's 1.8 billion Christians in the world. There's Jews, there's Hindus, there's all types of other religions that shouldn't be obligated. And there might be Muslims who don't even want to practice that specific thing of the religion while they're training the martial arts. So
if anybody out there who's listening wants to look into that, and you're just curious about what you're speaking of, right? There's a couple things you could research. One's called Tanaga Dam, which is directly religious. Another one is called Debus, which is like the act of self-mutilation without harm. You see televangelists do this magic tricks as well. And then you have Ilmu Laduni, which is another religious practice. So like all of these things have to do with like harnessing your spirituality, either from power from some kind of other beyond source. And then you wave your hands and it flies people across the room, or that'd be more Tanaga Dalam. Or you do like Debus, where they'll like cut their arm and they're bleeding everywhere and they wipe it off and there's no blood. It's just a magic trick, but unfortunately gets kids killed. There are videos out there of kids getting extremely injured through these practices of Debus because they believe it. They're taught that it's real. And then Ilmu Luduni is just funny. Like even the military over there does some of the shit. Not saying everyone in the military believes this crap, but there are videos of like military instructors in full BDUs, and someone will run at them and they'll wave their hand during a military exercise and they'll freeze. And they'll just like pick the guy up and move him around like he's just stuck. It's like, this is bullshit. What are you doing?
Superpowers.
I wish I'd stop.
It would be cool if it was real, but unfortunately it's not. Yeah, it would be kind of cool.
We can hope one day. That's all I want.
If we keep doing it, maybe eventually we'll be the ones. We'll be the real no touch knockouts.
That would be
McDojo Life, the Inside Fighting. We'll be the first two real no touch knockouts ever developed.
I wish one day.
All right, brother. I mean, this was a great talk. I really appreciate you coming on. Everyone watching, please follow McDojo Life. Doing great things out there, and he's actually a huge help to the martial arts community with calling out all these predators and fake schools.
I appreciate it, man. And like anyone out there, like I don't know everything about everything. There's plenty of shit I don't know. There's plenty of stuff I'm learning all the time. Like any advice I can give anyone out there is just do your research. Like, if you're going to go to a martial arts studio, just ask them, did they get background checks done? If you just ask that question, it'll say a lot about that individual. It'll say a lot about that school. Most places require nothing to get started. They don't even need to know martial arts, to be honest. They just have to be good at talking. And so if you do your due diligence and your research to form your own opinions, you're going to get more out of martial arts. Don't worry about what other people say. Fuck me too. You don't even have to listen to me. If I say I don't like an art, that's my opinion, right? I will give you facts about why I don't like an art, but at the end of the day, if it benefits you, if it helps you in some way, and you're not being taken advantage of, who gives a shit about anyone else's opinion? Doesn't matter. Do the thing that makes you happy. Do the thing that's going to benefit you. Everyone else can suck a dick. You can do what you like to do. All right. Like, again, including me. You don't have to listen to my opinion. Make your own opinion and then go with it if it helps you.
Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate you.